Okay, I think I'm good to go. We just begin? Let's dive into this. Well, hey everyone, good morning. Thank you so much for coming out to our talk here on exploiting advanced and volatile memory analysis, challenges for fun and profit. So overall, the whole purpose of this is to see additional capabilities that we can create by analyzing volatile memory. What else can we do? We will also go over towards the end, hopefully we get there, on new ways that you can characterize samples, new ways you can characterize binaries and DLLs on that system in order to better determine if you've been compromised by malicious software. So here are some things that hopefully we will cover. Just the really important thing over here, I have the live demonstration gremlin, and that's because I always do live demos so far, and sometimes there's that live demo gremlin that always creeps in. So hopefully that does not happen, but if it does, I'll do my best to recover. And then just a quick disclaimer. The information that I am presenting here, it definitely does not represent the Department of Defense, the Department of the U.S. Air Force, or any government agency. It's just myself, just my own research work, and hopefully it's useful to help in the field. All right, so here are some book references. And so this talk is actually a highly condensed version of a week-long workshop that I create and run on volatile memory analysis. And so at least on the top right side, all of those books are consulted at some point in the creation of this research and the creation of the materials. And so it's also provided to you in case you want to learn more. An important thing to see is towards this side, if you see a question mark and then some text here, that's where I'm putting the exact reference that we're taking in this research. So if you want to learn more, if there's a concept that is interesting to you, you can reach out to that, to those resources there. Okay, just a real quick background. Who am I? Right now, I'm a transitioning graduate student. I just transitioned from being the director of cyber operations training for a very, very large organization. Before that, I was an assistant professor of computer science at the United States Air Force Academy, as well as a research scholar at the University of Southern California. So I love doing research, love working with students. I love creating software and putting it out there for free, so just our community can enhance in various aspects of cybersecurity. Then I also was director of intrusion response at the AFCERT, Computer Emergency Response Team, as well as a security operations center manager. Before that one, I was a software reverse engineer, as well as a software developer, and then some education I like to learn, and hopefully we can learn some things through the process. So let's talk about the research motivation. Why are we here? What do we hope to learn and gain from this research? Well, the first one is a significant understanding that as we talk about malware, exploitation, ransomware, like this continues to increase in sophistication and prevalence. There was a research study that came out around, I want to say 2015 or 2016 from a corporation in the United States called RAND. And so what this organization found was that the average lifespan of malware, contrary to what our antivirus vendors will tell us, contrary to that, but the average lifespan of malware that they analyzed was over 7 years before it was finally detected on the victim machine. 7 years. To put things into perspective, if I am writing a malware, if I'm able to persist or live or become active on a machine for about an hour, that's an infinity for me. I can do a lot of things in an hour. Talk less of 7 years that malware is still able to persist and live on victim machines and victim networks before they're finally being detected and then mitigated off of the enterprise. Something else, as I say, it continues to advance. It has advanced beyond the point that even the operating system does not even know it's executing the malware, yet it is still doing this at the will and the behest of the malware authors. But one place to really understand where malware cannot easily hide, and especially where malware cannot hide at all, is in memory. And so if we understand how do we analyze, how do we look through memory, then we can actually increase our ability to detect and to respond to various types of threats that are impacting our enterprise machines. So if we just go quickly through the memory analysis artifacts. And so on the right side, I believe that's your right side. So there are three main phases in any time that we are conducting an investigation, especially like a forensics type investigation. The first one, we have to do some sort of acquisition. How do we acquire? How do we get something that we're going to analyze? And then we go into the analysis phase. We're looking and conducting the investigation. And then finally, we have some sort of report. It doesn't have to be a fancy report, but at least we're consolidating our notes into a cohesive manner that can be used to help other people along the way. So if we look at memory analysis, there are a few artifacts that I put up here that I like to reference on what can we actually extract from memory if we know what's to do. Some of those would include every single process or daemon that's running on the operating system. Some of those would include rootkits that are on the system that has now unpacked itself, or packed software that has unpacked itself that I can now dump from memory to begin my analysis and then mitigation against it. Some of these other artifacts can definitely include multiple descriptor tables, clipboard artifacts, different types of files, and prefetch and caching information that we can extract directly from memory, as well as network activity. There are a lot of artifacts that we can take from memory if we know how to do so. And then if we also have a process to extract it and then to analyze it. So later on, we'll get into the tool that I've created and updated that will help us do this automatically. And then hopefully it can increase your understanding of what's going on the victim machine. So we have a memory analysis triage process. So I put kind of these together that through my years of analyzing memory, and just looking at copious amounts of data, I figured out that just about everything that we're looking at can be consolidated into these 5 main pillars. So here's our stack of analysis that, again, we start from our acquisition here, and then we go into our analysis and up to our reporting. So on the first side, we have some sort of physical memory that we're going to acquire. We take memory, and then we create an image of this, so now we can use various extraction routines to understand what's there, and then to begin our analysis. Now, from our different extraction routines, this gives us just raw data, lots of data that we now go through line by line or use some sort of routine in order to analyze. Then with various aggregation routines, we can now consolidate most of the data into our 5 pillars that I've mentioned previously. Some sort of information that relates to a process, some information that relates to files, information that might relate to a module like a DLL or a driver, other information that relates to network activity, and finally, which information can I use as some sort of cache. For instance, a journal, like your master file table, we can call this a cache of the file system that I can extract from memory to see what's running on the system. And then finally, towards our reporting side, this is where we take the data and then we convert from data into knowledge in order to help us make decisions about what we are seeing. So just real quick, here are some tools of the trade in order to conduct our acquisition, analysis, and then however we choose to report. The first one, there are different aspects that we can use in order to do that acquisition. So there's two main kind of families of acquisition. If we look at online, the system is on, it's working, and now I'm doing a dump of the memory so I can begin that analysis. Or if it's offline, the system has turned off at some point. There are still areas that I can go into the non-volatile area of the hard drive and extract pieces of the memory that might have been written to disk to allow us to conduct that investigation. On this, for this talk, I utilized this tool here called Magnet RAM Capture. So it's a tried and true tool that I've used many times in various investigations in order to help me acquire an image, an exact copy of RAM onto the hard drive or onto my system so I can begin that analysis. Then the analysis tools, there are many tools that exist out there to help us do analysis. For this talk, we wrote a wrapper on top of volatility in order to help us just get the raw data and then do additional analysis from that standpoint. And then reporting, whatever else we want to do with the data, like where do we put it? You can ingest this into like a Kibana dashboard or an Elk stack, or you can just write your own custom template, which is what I did. I just wrote something custom real quick in HTML to allow us to better browse the system and see what we're able to extract from the machine. So if we look into the data extraction, as I mentioned, I use my extraction for volatility. Now, just as a spoiler, I'm not talking about how to use volatility, but just stating that that was a tool used to acquire the data, and then let's do additional analysis from that standpoint. So if we look at the memory analysis, there's different ways that we want to gain information about the system. I spoke about those 5 pillars. You can see some of those here, in which process there are different plugins, we would call, or procedures that I can use to analyze the memory. In the research, you will also see this concept of a sibling. So normally, whenever there is a process that is instantiated on the host machine, you have a parent, like a parent process that was used to instantiate other processes. But it's also useful to understand the sibling process, which other processes were created by the same parent. This is applicable in certain areas like ransomware. So if you have a system that's actually compromised with ransomware, you would normally notice, if you've ever analyzed a computer that has like a real ransomware on it, it's never just one process that's running that's allowing it to encrypt the information on the hard drive and then show the screen, all your data belong to us unless you pay this money or you pay this fine. It's always multiple processes. And so if you are lucky that you're like, well, this is the process that's showing the screen, enter, go here, call this number to decrypt your information on the drive. If you try and kill that process, many times you'll see that it will just respawn, like multiple programs are watching each other. So that's why I have added in this sibling process such that we can see who are the other processes that are instantiated from the same parent to better be able to isolate where that ransomware, other programs might be checking itself in order to stay alive. Then network activity, spoke about it before, DLLs, files, and then data carving. There are a couple of modules that we could use to extract additional data or additional memory dumps from that image, and then conduct our analysis further from that standpoint. Right. Now, I am curious, as a show of hands, if you can just let me know real quick, has anyone ever done memory analysis or used volatility or a recall type of tool to conduct investigation? Yeah, okay, all right, very good. So that's quite a few people. So if you have done this before, then I think this slide really hits home, in which let's appreciate the difficulty with actually conducting memory analysis. So for one, and you will understand this if you've used these types of tools, that there is a deluge of data, just raw data that comes from any type of memory analysis. And so on my side, every time I would run a plugin or try and understand, enact some sort of routine to extract data from a memory image, I'd always save that to another file. Then I have to analyze these files line by line, line by line. What if you're in an actual real-life investigation? This can be very, very tedious because there's a lot of data that's going to be exchanged across these routines. And so that's why it's man, this is an inefficient way of conducting this type of memory analysis. But that's okay. The good news is I saw that and I said, there's got to be a better way that we can aggregate this data. And that's why in the research, you'll see this concept called plugin aggregates or aggregate plugins, as well as a data cross-referencing feature. So this is what it looks like. An aggregate plugin. If we want to talk about a process, what does that process look like? How is it instantiated? What details are relevant for that specific process? If we're using, once again, a tool like volatility, there are over 20 or 30 different plugins that we would have to run in order just to gain an understanding and an awareness about a process. So now if we can use different aggregate routines, we can actually just say, okay, let's analyze all of that different information or the data from those different routines. Let's analyze that, and now I will just show you that, hey, here is a process, and now you can see all the information up front instead of having to consult so many different files that have been dumped in order, as you're understanding this system. Right? So that's what this is kind of producing for you. And I just reference it as the Xavier construct. And now you have a user interface, a semi-interactive interface to say, okay, I want to learn about a process, a module, a driver, different things that are present on the system. Let me just click on that and let all the information be presented to me instead of me having to read so many different files. So that's what that construct looks like. All right, so we're going to dive straight into a quick demo real quick, and hopefully these things are going to work. Because I believe we're going to have at least 3 demos, and we'll see if it works out. Okay, so everything that we are talking about, actually, almost everything we're talking about is already present on my GitHub. And so if you just Google my name, Solomon, Sonya, GitHub, Xavier, you'll see all of this code. So the code, the tools, and how to run it. I need to enhance the how-to, that will come hopefully on Sunday as I'm flying back. But at least everything here is going to be present. And this morning, I made another update, so that update should be live, hopefully this afternoon. So this is what the actual tool itself looks like. If I go into this folder. So I think the text is relatively small, but to set it up, if you go onto the GitHub, there's a jar file or a binary that's already created that you can use to run. And so you'll just download that into your, whichever folder you want to do your analysis. And then inside here, there is a separate folder that is created. It's called Xavier Framework. And so if this is the first time that you're running the tool, you don't have to worry about setting up your machine just yet. Just double-click it and then close. And now your basic folder construct should be set up for you. And so a few things to understand. In the export, this is the export. This is the output from the analysis that the tool provides. In the import, in memory analysis, there's a memory analysis directory that should be created. And inside here, this is where you would drop in your volatility tool, your executable. So right now, this runs best on Windows, because as I'm developing the software, I'm like, I want it to be cross-platform compatible. But unfortunately, I chose the hardest system to develop on, which is actually Windows, versus the Unix side. So all of these that we're doing is version 2.3 or just version 2. And so finally, whenever you see version 3 uploaded onto GitHub, hopefully within a month or two, that's when it's cross-platform compatible, that it runs fully on Unix, and then it also runs fully on Windows side. But at least the best use case right now is running this on your Windows machine. Okay, so with your volatility tool, you'll drop the latest version of volatility here into the memory analysis folder. And then in the memory image, this is where you would put your image that you have already extracted before that we want to run the analysis. Now there is a help file, a setup.conf file for your configuration. And inside here, a template should be written to your hard drive once you run this the first time. But there are 3 main artifacts that you have to change in order to make this run sufficiently. The first one is here where it says investigator name. If you just enter your name or whoever's conducting the investigation or doing the analysis, and then that key is used in every plugin that's run. So it kind of just helps you know who did what at what time, et cetera. Then the next artifact that is necessary, and a description of the investigation. So on this side, I am running a memory analysis, and I conducted multiple experiments to see what does an interpreter look like whenever you infect a machine? How do you determine once it's there? How do you determine the new process that has been compromised with the malware that's been dumped into the machine? If you saw from Paula, she just mentioned that there are different types of hooking and code injection that could occur, and she even mentioned Metasploit. I'm like, that's a perfect segue, because we will see hey, what does that Metasploit actually look like in memory? And so that's something really cool that we can investigate. But that's the image that we're running here. Just an initial interpreter was instantiated on the victim machine, and at that point, I took a dump of memory to see what does it look like, what's there, what keys and alerts can be provided to us, such that now we can see how do you better secure your machines. And then here, the profile. So volatility still requires a profile, and so the profile that I am running this on is a Windows 7 Service Pack 1 x64. Right. Okay. And then finally, packages. So you will have to set up the packages. I think I will come back and auto-download these packages for you on the Windows side. But there is dependencies that's required. It's just the dependencies executable. GraphViz, and you'll see how this GraphViz is useful in this. I believe you will. We'll see. We'll see what it looks like. We'll see what it looks like. And then strings and whois to do a reverse whois lookup on your computer. Right, okay, so when all of those are configured and ready to run, we just double-click our executable, and as soon as it runs, let me do this, and it will run. It will now look at the volatility executable that we put into the memory analysis folder, and then from the plugins that it learns, it provides those plugins to you to say, okay, I want to execute X or Y plugin, et cetera, however you like to conduct your investigation. So this part, I've spoken about it, for a while at other conferences, but in essence, if there is a plugin that you really love running, like let's say NetScan or so you can search for it at this plugin search and then click NetScan or all of the plugins that you like, and then when you're ready to execute that, you can just click Analyze. And as soon as you click Analyze, moving into the memory analysis side, down here at the bottom, each of the plugins will have its own tab that you can see the outputs of that. But that's, that's the old stuff. Let's talk about the new things here. So in this talk, the advanced analysis that we perform, I try and make it as easy as possible for you. So once you instantiate the program, everything is running well when you see different plugins here. Yeah, when you see different plugins show up, all right, you're good to go. From that point, if you look here, this tells you details about the configuration file that you set up previously. So it tells you the path to the volatility executable. That's here, as well as the profile that you put into the configuration file. It says the path to the image that it's reading from the memory image folder that we went over, attributes about that file, and then this is the investigator name. So the investigator name that you put in, as well as the description, that's going to show up here, and then it'll be in every single one of the exports that come once the analysis is created. And then from that standpoint, you actually just hit Initiate Advanced Analysis, and then so you click it, and then you go take a long coffee. Because depending on the speed of your machine, as well as the size of the image, that analysis is going to take at least like 30 minutes to run through the majority of the plugins and then do the aggregation for you, and then to finally produce that report. So that's why I say you just click it and then just let it run for some time. I'm not going to do that because I don't even have enough time for the initial analysis to occur. But let's say I've clicked it, 30 minutes has elapsed. Whenever it's done, it will produce a folder that looks similar to, let me find, yeah, no. 1 second. Experiments. Aha. Okay, so whenever it's finished running, so here I'm just in another folder. Now this is where I ran one of the experiments looking at what does an initial interpreter look like. So in this folder, this is where we set it up. Previously, as you saw, there was a template. We put our files and then we launched the execution. So here, once it's run, you go back into the folder. You go into exports because you're looking at the data that is exported from the tool. And then whichever date that we ran it, so this is the last time I ran this analysis. And then there's a folder for every plugin that was run. And on top of that, if I go into something like, let me just do the MFT parser. So if I go into a file like this, like the MFT parser, this is why you set up the configuration file. So all of those details are already put into every file that is run and executed. And then if you still like to say, well, I want to look at this line by line, well, you can look at the line by line if you desire. But it's just here for reference and then for the tool itself to do the analysis. Now, when it's finished, 2 important folders that you care most about. The first one is going to be the HTML folder, and then the next one is going to be the manifest folder. So HTML and manifest, we'll talk about the manifest in the next demo. But if I go into the HTML, this is what the report will look like. So it says analysis report, and then the file image that we did our analysis on. Now, you will have a HTML that is produced, kind of some practical information about the analysis, the tool that's run, et cetera. That's going to be put up here. And then you have different sections that has more consolidated details about the analysis. So one of the things, if I expand each one of these, and hopefully it's going to expand. Oh, OK, good, it did expand properly. So if I expand each one, if we look at the process tree, for instance, I always like to know, what is the call tree? What tool or what executable call the next executable? So that's why this is here. But that's basic. We'll go into additional details to come. You saw that there was a graph viz plugin that was provided for you. And that graph viz, it just automates what the call tree looks like for you. So in case you like a basic call tree of the processes on the system, you can click on this. Something else as we orient ourselves to this interface, if I go to the bottom right side, you see each one of these buttons, it has a link to directly pivot to the entire file. So if you want it to be larger, you can just click on that. So what I'll do, I'm going to come down to the system information tree. And so in the system information tree, let me enlarge this in a quick second here. Right. And so in this side, I think this is viewable some sort of way. So when we spoke about the previous pillars. So in process, if I want to see all the information about a process, I can just click on process. And then that process will expand, and now I can see every process on the system. You can zoom in if you like. And then I know the malicious process here. It's spools 1176, and you will see why in a few moments. But if I click on this process, we can now expand additional information about that process. So here is its parent process, once again, its call tree, its sibling process. And so this is what I meant by a sibling process. All of these processes were instantiated by the same parent. And so this comes in very handy whenever you're dealing with ransomware that has multiple executables that it's working and running. And so this is one way to quickly come in and see it. Okay, so if I expand here, like for instance, DLLs, especially as doing reverse engineering on a sample, I like to see what are the imports, what are the import functions, what's coming in to this sample, because this lets me know some of its additional features that it might try and execute once it's running. So you can click and expand each of these to gain additional information about the imports. Here I'm looking at the DLLs at this side, as well as import files. So import files, this will come in very handy when we talk about process injection. And so in the import files, there are lots of these. I can click on each of the imports that was found during the analysis of the system, and then you can just see additional details, like what is module information, its file attributes that was dumped, other processes that could be using the exact same DLL. And so whenever we go into, again, hooking or injecting, if a same DLL has been compromised, you might also be able to find other processes that DLL is running from. Okay, so in essence, on your side, there's quite a few things that we can click through. I'm just showing you real quick what the basic interface looks like. Towards the bottom side here, actually, I went there. Yeah, so now we're back into the main output. So towards the bottom, we also have tables. So at the top side, these are graphs. And so down here, these are tables. So the tables consolidates what you have into an Excel format. And so you can take this and ingest it into another tool or Logstash, et cetera. So if you have other things or ways that you like to search or filter other types of details, all the information from the processes is now aligned here line by line. And I'm not online. I'm not online on this machine. But here, if you also click on link for each of the executables, this should drop you into a virus total that looks at the hash of the file, and then you can determine very quickly if that file is compromised or malicious or not. Just one easy way to pivot between each of these systems that's provided for you. And then towards the bottom, under the execution plugins, so these are each of the plugins that was executed previously that, if you do like to come here and look at it line by line, all that information is provided for you. So this is one of the basic outputs that's provided for you. You just have to look through this, and spend some time to see if this is going to be useful or relevant in your investigation. So I'm going quickly, and that's intentional because I want to get to the other demos real quick. But that's just we execute the advanced analysis, and that output is going to be provided for you. Okay, so let's talk about the system manifest. So whenever we do this type of investigation analysis to a memory image, as I mentioned before, it takes time. It takes a lot of time, especially if you're doing this hand by hand. Every single plugin, every single type of data extraction is going to take some time to execute. Now, the system manifest has been created in this research in order to distill a multi-gigabyte image down to a single, a 10 to 20 megabyte file. And so that 10 or 20 megabyte file now, I can use that to replay the entire investigation or all the analysis that we had before. So instead of always having to go back and do the reinvestigation and the analysis that we've done before, you can just load a manifest file. And so I will show you real quick what that manifest file looks like. So I mentioned, the HTML file. That's the important one to look at whenever the analysis is complete, as well as the manifest folder. So in the manifest, there are 2 files that will be written by default. Other files may be written later. We'll see what's most useful to you. Just let me know if you need information in a different format. But if I go into the timeline, just real quick, so yes, it's raw data. I'm showing raw lines, but there's a purpose here. If you've also worked with volatility, you're probably familiar with the super timeline, this concept of super timeline. So the super timeline, this takes multiple plugins and tries to give you a single interface for the different events that executed on the machine. But what I found, even looking at that super timeline, is that it actually omits some critical data about some times on which some action executed on the machine. So that's why I took every single other artifact that did have a timestamp associated, and then you have a single interface here that if you were to, again, ingest this into another type of viewer, like in Excel, Logstash, et cetera, now you can have better filtering, and then you can also better sort events based on the time that an occurrence happened. And so here, if you know an infection happened at, let's say, time X, I usually go to that time X, I subtract a little bit to see what was the precipice for an entire event or an action. So I can kind of figure out, in a better way, you reconstruct the timeline of when an investigation or an infection occurred. All right, so that's, basic. But here, this is the manifest file. So the manifest file, it's not created for you to go in and read. Now, I was nice. I did not encrypt any of the data, so you can see what's there. But in general, it's actually just meant for you to instantiate a tool. So I don't think I've loaded. Yeah, I haven't loaded anything on this. Okay, that's good. So it's for you to start this up again. And then if I want to reload an entire investigation, I can just go to File, Import. And you do have two import options. One would be to import an entire analysis directory. And so what that looks like is, I think, here. Yeah, so this is the entire analysis directory. So if you do want to reanalyze this, or you archive this and you come back later on, you want to see what the details look like, you can also, if you want to do some searching or data cross-referencing, you can load the entire directory once again. Or you can just load the manifest file. And so the manifest file import, manifest. Okay, so this is what would allow us, I think I can, no, let me go back. Manifest, yeah. So this would, it will allow us to do the entire investigation, is looking through all the details once again that it had before, and then when it is done, it says, that one looks kind of small, but I think this has the details that we need, and if not, we'll figure this out. Okay, so once you do load the this entire system manifest, the same information will be provided to you as if you're running the investigation, and you're waiting like the 30 minutes initially for it to grab all the data for you. But there are multiple tabs that would show up in the advanced analysis automation here that says, these are the things you really need to look at first. So the first one, your different NetStat activities that was provided. Here are your user assist entries. And so your user assist entries are really useful. Let's say you're doing a challenge, a capture the flag challenge. And you kind of want to see, what did the user do in one instance or another? Well, one quick way to see, what did the person, run on or what did they execute is looking at the user assists. So here we can copy this. I can put it into an Excel document. And now I can sort by time, because usually the thing that's most important to the user is sorted by time. So you might be able to see that here at this side. Then you have two other outputs, and based on the console outputs, if something, if something executed from the terminal or the command prompt and it was captured from memory, this is showing you that you need to look at these things, because this could be relevant to your investigation. You could find keys, you could find different descriptors from the malware on how it executed on the machine to help you in that investigation. Now to the right side, and here I just have it as malfind entries. And so in one of the executables, or one of the plugins that Volatility will run for you, is malfind. And so that's supposed to be quick for finding malware on the machine. And before I did this type of kind of research to figure out what's going on, I was like, wow, malfind is magical. It's able to determine, hey, this is malware that's on the machine, and it points it out to you. But really, what the malfind is looking at are your virtual address descriptors that have page, read, write, and execute already enabled. Now, if we look at this, Microsoft many years ago executed DEP, your data execution prevention, and this was one way to prevent different types of code injection from occurring onto the machine. So for instance, if I have an executable or a DLL, they should have, where there are three access rights possible: read, write, and execute. No three of those should be activated at the exact same time. Now, if that is activated at the exact same time, this plugin provides it to you and says, hey, here's read, write, execute that's available because code could have been injected in this spot. And so what our tool does is it kind of goes a bit further. Here, I'm going to just copy this into Excel real quick, so I can do some zooming. Okay, and so I think the output should have said there are some specific malfind entries, that were detected that require your attention. And so if we look at these, I specifically look at where there could be injected code. And so I'm not going to open the other file, but lots of data could be provided in malfind, and sometimes you're like, this doesn't help me. But here, we really do want to look at in sections in memory where we can find an MZ header followed by other types of code. And now if we can think of this, an MZ header followed by other types of code, this is highly suspicious. You should not see this normally in memory. If I know where the executable started, then yes, I can find this type of header, to the start of a program. But if there are other regions or sections inside a program that I'm now finding these MZ headers possible, this is highly indicative that code injection has occurred. And that's exactly what happened here. So if I quickly talk about what's occurring, we see that the tool said, all right, we really need to look at this process ID. And on this side, the process ID, the process name is spools sv.executable, the spool service.exe. So on a unpatched Windows 7 machine, it's like the next greatest thing from the Net API attack from Windows XP is Blue Eternal, Eternal Blue. So that Eternal Blue is a lovely exploit, that runs on a Windows 7 if it's unpatched. This is a gift that keeps on giving that I can gain access to that machine. But the way it works is it compromises a vulnerable service, and then it writes if you're using an interpreter here, it's going to write the different stagers into memory, and then that's what's being executed for you. So here, when I said that this is a vulnerable process, this is the ID that was vulnerable, I executed the Eternal Blue, and then on the right side, here, where it says MZ present or trampoline, and so the culprit line is just kind of pointing it out to us that, hey, there's a file header here, and that should not be. So this is something really that we need to focus on. You can now already take this because the file will be automatically dumped to your machine. You can upload this onto VirusTotal, and then usually you'll be able to see that, yep, that's where an interpreter lies inside the machine. So this is something that's useful to help us look at. Another thing that should be looked at, focused on is a jump routine. And so you're like, jump routine? Well, the way that this works, and actually why I key in on this, is that if I have a hook, this is usually for hooking, that if I'm trying to hook another DLL that's running in memory, and so if I'm able to overwrite some of the initial bytes, I can cause your machine to jump somewhere else where I've already written malicious code and then start to execute from that standpoint. And so that's why the tool looks through those outputs to say, hey, there's a jump present. And as I said, it's not normal that if I go into an executable, like a library, it's jumping me somewhere else. That's not normal. And so that's why we're trying to say that, hey, this really does require your attention. But that's some of the initial output that's going to be provided to you once you launch the automated tool. Okay, let's get further along into the slides because I have another one to talk about. But that's also the benefit of just doing the manifest. That again, I can always replay this or ingest an entire multi-gigabyte image, distill it down to a single megabyte file to describe virtually everything about that entire memory image. Now, just real quick, I want to let's talk about virtual address descriptors. I'm only going to talk about this single line, but there are actually multiple details that I put into the slide in case you would like to learn more. So virtual address descriptors, that. So your virtual address descriptors, this is a data structure inside your memory that every process uses to track information about other processes. Or if a process needs to have handles or it's launched other files, it has other libraries that are loaded into it, you'll find specific entries in the virtual address descriptor. Now, why do we care about the virtual address descriptor? Well, because this leads us into better understanding code injection. So code injection, as I spoke about, you can think of it as I have a vulnerable process. I've now compromised that process, and I've overwritten myself into that process's space. And then I cause that process to execute my exploit that I've written into memory previously. So there are 4 main types of code injection. Here, this is what we will really care about, because this is what Meterpreter does if you're running Metasploit. So if you generally gain access to a system, Metasploit, and now you say, hey, the file I want to run is Meterpreter, that's a reflective DLL that is loaded onto the machine, that's injected into the machine. Not only is it injected, but it's injected only into memory. So the Meterpreter never touches disk, so I don't have something I can analyze just yet. So if we know what's to look at onto the machine before and after an infection, we can now better identify these types of reflective DLLs and also increase the security of our machines. And so this leads us into the concept of, I was just thinking about this morning, I can say it's a process characterization or module characterization across your entire enterprise. And this is even a big data problem that we have now introduced that can be solved. And so think of it this way. On an enterprise machine, we have hundreds, many hundreds of users on a single network. Let's say it's a large network, like a university or so. And each of the machines that are communicating, especially if it's machines that belong to the university, there are a finite set of actions that each of these processes or DLLs are going to do in order to load itself and to run. And so if we understand what's to dump and analyze, we can now characterize how each process and module should run on the computer machine. If we can do that, this leads us better into baselining to detect anomalies when anomalies occur. For instance, the spool service, that we'll go over again in another demo here. Hopefully it's going to work. But the spool service that we're using that's been compromised, there are additional DLLs that are required or that are loaded and configured by Metasploit in order to patch or bring over its additional stages to compromise the machine to allow you to do that command and control to the victim machine. But those DLLs, it's not normal to that specific process. And so that's why I'm saying if you can characterize this across an enterprise, now we can better detect whenever anomalies occur. And so this is another way that without having a signature to try and scan or search your machine, we can detect based off of anomalies and deviations from those anomalies. And that's why this characterization and that's where this characterization comes in. And so just real quick, this is the, just quick commands on setting up our Metasploit and our Meterpreter to execute the Eternal Blue exploit on an unpatched, a fresh install of Windows 7 to get us in. And as always, in case you've ever done an attack or exploitation, even to this day, on a system that you know is compromised, you must do the obligatory happy dance. It has to be done because we gain access to a machine. Now, once that's done, you configure, you console yourself, and then you continue on with the investigation. Okay, so here's how we constructed the next types of executions on the machine. My attacker machine, the IP address is 192.168.56.102. The victim machine, the last octet is .200. And so there are multiple different runs that we execute with the hypothesis that, hey, if we have a before and after baseline, can you now determine that an infection has occurred? And if so, what does that look like in memory? And yes, you can if we construct the appropriate baselines. And so here I actually ran multiple different types of, just quick actions on the machine once we gained in. But what we will look at is, let's look at this one, a migration. Yeah, because Paula spoke about migrating, like you migrate to another process. So let's see what a process migration would look like and what could have been detectable if we had an appropriate baseline of the victim machine. Let's see. Okay, I think that's it. All right, so in order to do that, and that comes with the manifest, there is a concept called snapshot analysis. And so in the snapshot analysis, this is where you ingest 2 previous manifests, and then it tells you what are the differences and what should you focus on between those 2 investigations. So in order to start that, I just go to initiate snapshot analysis. And then the snapshot analysis, it asks you for 2 things. One, it asks you for your first snapshot. So the first run of this, ingest that manifest file. And so what I'm going to ingest here let's ingest this one. Let's hope this works right. So I'm ingesting a snapshot before I did the process migration, and then it asks you for the second snapshot. This is the snapshot after an action has occurred, and then it will analyze that and tell you what the results look like. Now, as a spoiler alert, it's raw text, and it's very noisy because it's identifying every single descriptor that was different. I'm going to come back and write a better interface to kind of consolidate the data to you, but there are summaries that I just programmed this morning, and hopefully we'll see it work. So I first selected the first manifest, and this is the second manifest. Let me do that real quick, and I'll say open. And then what it's doing now is analyzing all the details, and then it provides it to you in snapshot analysis. And so here, there's a lot of data here. And so if you click on export data, so exporting it just lets me export whatever we have, export.txt. And then on the Windows side, it will open up some of the results. Now, if we look at this real quick, and so as I said, it's there is some tuning because it identifies a lot of data. So I want to help distill that down to you. But overall, if we look at the investigation summary, and so what it's able to determine, there are added processes, there are missing processes. I know I'm out of time, so just 2 minutes and I'll be done. But if we come down to this side, if we look at added DLLs, and so this is wonderful that there are different DLLs that are added from the previous exploit to now that's able to be detected. So I told you that this process, 1176 spool SV, spool service.exe, this was what Meterpreter initially exploited as part of that eternal blue. And then doing the analysis, it says that there are additional DLLs that it found part of this service that we will now see where it migrates over to. And so it looks like Explorer 2 was compromised, part of this migration, this process migration over to the victim process. And so the victim process I migrated to was win init. I believe that's, 372, so here it is. Okay, so before, what this is saying is that these DLLs were added, it was not found. And so we see that this process here, it takes its DLLs that are used in the exploit. And then if we go down here to this win service, because this was the process I migrated to, it's lovely that these are the additional DLLs that are required as part of that payload migration. So, when you think, I'm just going to do a migrate, and you think it's just a process that moves, there are multiple DLLs that are involved with that compromise. But this is also where that characterization comes from. So if we can do this across an entire enterprise, we should know that, hey, win init does not necessarily require this web IO or this URL mon or multiple DLLs inside of it, because that's not an action that has ever been seen before across an enterprise. And so in the future, as malware continues to increase in sophistication, we have to divorce ourselves from always expecting to find a signature. You will not always be able to find a signature. I remember as Mr. Nguyen was talking about, in 2014 when I went to HackCon, I was demoing a separate botnet that I wrote many, many years ago. And so that was a fun project, but this is the issue with signatures. That botnet that I wrote and released open to the world, my own computer did not determine or detect that executable was malicious until about 3 or 4 years later. And so that's why I'm just trying to say that signatures is wrong. But if we do know how to characterize the processes and DLLs on our machine, especially if we can use an automated tool like this, then this could automatically identify some of the issues, and just say nope, this is wrong, this requires further investigation. That was detected. We knew that was present here because this was the compromised program previously, but now the Meterpreter migrated into wininit.exe. So wininit.exe, that process is 372. If we look to the right, it has 3 additional page descriptors that are page, read, write, execute. Again, this should not be. And so in the future, if we know what we're looking for, this is something that should immediately raise those red flags, over to your investigators to say nope, this is wrong. We have to investigate further, dump the memory, and then do additional analysis because there's automated ways to know that a breach has occurred. And then if I go to the right, it does show us that, there are MZ, so very likely of code execution. I only show the initial header. There are many other things that we could show, but I'm trying to condense this down for easy consumption. Okay, so That was very, very fast. Honestly, that was very fast. There is a lot that I would love to talk about or discuss, but at least this is a start. And so now, as an exercise to the experts, run the tool just as we've spoken about. You download Volatility, you grab a dump of memory, and launch the tool. Do an action on that before and after and see what you can discover. You can utilize this tool to help you in many additional investigations, as well as to begin that characterization of what are the anomalies across an entire enterprise. And then, just stay tuned. I do machine learning work now, and so some of my next tools will actually be like, how do you do this at scale? How do you do this across an entire enterprise? Because the first thing is, I need to grab the data first, which is what we're showing in this tool. So now one of the last things that, hey, what do we learn here? Well, we learned that with that snapshot analysis, like this introduces big data possibilities that you can characterize your processes and DLLs across that enterprise in order to better find what's malicious, instead of, again, relying on those signatures or fuzzy signatures to try and determine that an infection has occurred. There's got to be better ways, and so this is one of those ways to help us in the future. All right, so in summary, if you are looking for other analysis tools, so it's a basic website, but I do have other memory challenges available as well as runs. So I've done different investigations that are available for you, and then you can directly pivot to that challenge, or you can see some ways that other individuals have solved that. That's available on my website at solomonsonya.com. And then finally, other things that if you did want to learn more, then I highly suggest looking at material from Jessica Hyde. She's really good in forensics. She works for Magnet, and so she has a really good talk on how do you get started into this if you've never done it before. And there are other challenges here, like this one from James Smith. He has a really, really good write-up of how do you go from the beginning of an entire forensics investigation towards memory analysis and then, enhancing your skill set overall. Cyber defenders, I like their work because like every other week or so, it's like they're always coming up with a new challenge. And so here are ways to get stronger and smarter at this is you take a challenge, you learn from other people, you can look at the solutions, and then you can see how do you increase your skill sets overall. In my previous talks, I talk about a specific challenge, MemLabs. So there are 6 educational images that are created, and you can Google how-tos to solve these. And so this is also something else that I like to reference in case you've never done memory analysis before, to do those first, learn it by hand, and then this tool makes a lot more sense on how it can help automate and speed up your process. And so there are other links. All right, I don't know if I have time for questions, but that's all I have. If you do have any questions, please come find me, because I'd love to talk about this tool in further detail. Do I have time for a question? I don't know. Kick me out if I'm out of time. Okay, I can take 2 questions. If there are any questions, are there any questions, anything that I can answer from what we've covered so far? I can't see because there's a light. I'm not seeing any questions, so, I'm sorry, are there any? Did I miss anyone? Right, well, thank you so much for your time. If you do have questions, please always just come find me. Thanks again, hope you have a great day. Thank you.